Celtics Beat is brought to you by Prizepicks and the Gametime app.
Hey everyone, welcome in. This is a brand new Celtics Beat. Adam Kaufman, M. Valenti, we are always here. And of course, a happy Passover to the fellow members of the tribe who celebrate and enjoy, like our good friend, our guest today, Dan Greenberg. Of course, from Barstool Sports, you know him as Barstool or Stool Greenie or whatever. I mean, a man of many names, just Greenie probably to most people out there in the Twitter sphere, where he keeps you active all day, every day, most especially in and around Celtics news and live tweeting during games. The man is always keeping you entertained. We've said it. He is in many ways. And this is a big responsibility that he needs to bear on those shoulders, those broad shoulders that Jaylen Brown seeks. If you pay attention to his Twitter of late, it's a responsibility that he holds near and dear to his heart as being the voice of the fan.
One of them.
In many ways. Greenie, how are you, bud?
I'm good. And, I often joke, it's not a life I chose. It's a life that chose me. It's just, my plight in life, unfortunately. And what are you going to do?
Here's what we got going for the people out there. If you are watching on the CLNS YouTube page or listening, of course, in podcast form, we greatly appreciate you. Rate, review, download, subscribe. Most importantly, to Celtics Beat, wherever you get your podcast. So this is a unique position here. Evan and I probably should have talked in advance. We both plan vacations next week. So next week, the start of the playoffs, you are going to have someone else hosting this program. As we sit here right now, I can't tell you exactly who that is. Now, depending on what you think of this show, usually, you are either elated by that news or disgruntled and think we should take our work more seriously. How dare we go on vacation this time of year? I get it. I wouldn't lament you for feeling that way, but this is the reality. And so this is kind of a playoff preview, and we wanted to have Greenie here for that purpose because he is, of course, as clued in, as glued to all things NBA, not just the Celtics, but other teams as well. So it's a good sort of starting point. I know we're not quite at the play-in tournament, but we know what that's going to look like, and we know what the playoff seeding is going to look like in the Eastern Conference, so we can kind of project ahead. For instance, I can tell you out there that either 1 week from today, as we sit here on a Saturday, or 8 days from today, if you don't feel like doing quick math, be it the 19th or the 20th, Saturday, Sunday, next weekend, we are going to have the Celtics beginning their playoff first round, and that will come against the winner of the Magic Hawks play-in tournament game, which is going to be played on Tuesday. So only a couple days from now. So it is either going to be Orlando, the team that once upon a time Cedric Maxwell told us we should fear in the playoffs. I know things have changed there for the Magic since he made that proclamation. Or the Hawks, Trae Young, who is known to give the Celtics fits in the past after he dreamed of being one once upon a time. So it'll be those two guys, either Trae Young or, Banchero, Wagner, I guess those three people that will be positioned potentially to try and upset the Celtics in round one of the playoffs. Yep. I guess we start with this, Greenie, and then we'll get to, latest news, especially surrounding the health of Jaylen Brown and all of that. Either one of these teams give you, I know, there's no situation where a loss is acceptable in the first round of the playoffs, given this a 60-plus win team with banner 19 aspirations. So that's not the question. Should either of these teams even take a game, honestly? Like, which team is more live to push the Celtics to 5 and, dare I say, 6 in the first round?
I would say the Hawks. Whenever I think of this matchup, there's pluses and minuses of both teams, right? The Magic have an elite defense, but a lower offensive ceiling. The Hawks have a higher offensive ceiling, but a lower defensive floor. And they're without Jalen Johnson, who I'm pretty sure is out for the year, right, with that shoulder injury. But I look at it as the Hawks already have experience extending first or second round series against the Celtics. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking of if the thing that would make that possible would be an off shooting night for the Celtics, right? It's just an off night for them. I would want to play the team that has the lower offensive ceiling. We've seen Trae Young go crazy. We've seen him make game-winning 30-footers. I just think I come off the game we just saw against the Magic, against the Hospital Celtic version. They made 16 threes in that game, played all their guys, didn't even crack 100 points. So I just think you have a bigger margin for error for you to have an off night playing a team like the Magic. And there's something about the way that Dyson Daniels is guarding your perimeter, wing defenders. I'd rather not have to deal with that headache. And I'm still a little bitter over the 2009 Magic Celtics series and their title defense year without KG. So of those two teams, I think the Hawks present more challenges for you to deal with. I just don't think the Magic have the shooting to sustain it. And it would be a surprise if they, ripped off more than one. I think both teams can win a game just because it's very hard to sweep a team in the playoffs. I just would rather face the team that we know can't really score.
Yeah, the Magic are fun just because they just have all these big bodies between Banchero, Wagner, Jonathan Isaac. If he's going to be healthy for an entire whatever game series, you never know with him. He's always banged up. But the size that they have, I think, can present a different mismatch in certain different ways. Like for me, I know Dyson Daniels is awesome and he's had a terrific season and deserves all the flowers that he could possibly get. But you think about the Celtics and the way they play, Trae Young being on the floor is just going to be a guy they hunt relentlessly throughout the entire series. And I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here only because, we have to get some back and forth. First and foremost, no matter what happens here, they're going to win this series unless something catastrophic happens to Tatum. I mean, we have a Gordon Hayward situation here. They're going to be favorites against either team. Much like last year, they should handle it in about 5 games. Yeah. But if there's anybody that's going to be a bigger pain in the ass, I actually think Orlando is going to be a bigger pain in the ass because defensively, they are very, very, very good. Now, they can't score at all, as Greenie alluded to. They had a great night against the Hospital Celtics and couldn't crack 100.
Yeah.
This is a Celtics team that cracks 100 in 3 quarters a lot. So right. I get that. But I just think the size and the athleticism of a team like Orlando, and I'm a big Banchero guy. That guy for his age has a man's body. And, I'm a little terrified of what he can do just based off his physicality. But, I think we're all just kind of – it's going to be a 5-game series regardless of who they play, as long as everybody's healthy. I think I'd just rather play an Atlanta team who just can't – they just can't hang – unless Trae Young goes nuclear for 4 games. We know that's not happening with the defenders that Boston has.
The only thing that I hesitate to use the term worries, but the only thing that concerns me to some degree, not about whether or not the Celtics win the series, but about just how long it takes, is the element of, playing with your food, not taking it as seriously, knowing you are the better team that is supposed to win, is going to win. And you sort of take your foot off the gas in moments long enough that can lead to having to play more that, extend the series, having to play more than you justifiably should have to play. And that's the point, guys, where I get concerned. It's not the, it's just, you talk about margin for error, obviously in one sense where it's, you got the bigger margin against the Magic because of what they achieved against the Hospital Celtics and still didn't get 100 points and all of that stuff. When I think about margin for error in this way, it's, I would much rather, and no crap, Kaufman, I'd much rather win a series in 4 games than 5, not because it's nice to sweep, but because playing one more game just opens the door to 48 more minutes of possible injury and possible problem. You know what I mean? So that's the only thing that I worry about a little bit in this path that, we hope is a 2-month-long playoff run to the middle of June, then a duck boat parade and all that stuff, just like last year. I don't want to see them have to extend themselves any more than necessary. I want to see them come out, feed on the throat mentality and just try and decimate teams from moment one. But we know there are points, Greenie, and I don't think this team has had a big problem with it. Again, we're talking about a team that might finish with 61 wins in the regular season. This has been a great team, but this is still a team that has shown at moments, like any other team, we're not as into it tonight. We're up by 20 and we're going to coast from here. And all of a sudden, your 20-point second quarter lead turns into a sweaty fourth quarter. That's the thing that I sort of would have my eyes on going into a series like this.
And I would just say, if you're concerned about prolonging series that you have no business playing longer than you should, that's why I feel like a team like the Hawks present more challenges than that. They're an unbelievable offensive rebounding team. We've seen Clint Capella, Okongwu, especially late in these fourth quarters, like that's how they lost in the playoff games that, a few years ago. That's how they lost earlier this season against the Hawks. So I just think when you think of all the ways that you could potentially drop one of these playoff games, between Trae Young going nuts, Dyson Daniels creating live ball turnovers, and the offensive rebounding, there's just more pressure points that the Hawks provide. Like, I know the Magic have an elite defense. They have good perimeter size, but they're not giving you those same type of pressure points, right? They're good in the half court. They're making you maybe shoot lower than your season average, but I'm not really worried about them generating live ball turnovers. I'm not really worried about, their front court dominating on the offensive glass like we see with Okongwu especially. So I'm just looking at it like, if the Celtics have an off night, we saw it in the Cleveland series, we saw it in the Heat series last night, there's going to be one game where you're going up against, some sort of aberrational shooting night and you're going to be cold. When that happens, I just think the Magic have less ways to beat you. And to the point of, seal hunting and all that stuff, if they're going to have to rely on someone like Cole Anthony to score, he's another smaller guard that you can attack. So you can abuse that approach the same way you would with Trae Young, but Cole Anthony's not going to give you 30 and 10 on the other end. So I think they're going to have to play well to beat both. I think having a mentality that you can just walk in and sweep any opponent is always asking for disaster. And I think with the uncertainty of, we don't know when the Porzingis injury is coming, because that's probably happening at some point, and then you have the Jaylen Brown health, this year might be the most important season to not play with your food and keep things as tight as you can.
To give the Celtics credit, though, because this is something they talked about last year in their run to the finals in Banner 18, they talked about the year prior, 2023, is they just tried to skip steps. I don't remember if it was Jaylen or Jason that said the words like, we didn't skip any steps this year, or we knew we couldn't.
Jaylen
said
that
steps.
a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I love that mentality of they went through the BS in 2023 where they went to 6 games with a Hawks team they shouldn't have gone 6 games with. Like, they had no business. They just didn't care as much. Last year you saw that laser focus right from the beginning. And like, yeah, they dropped games at home. Like, they dropped game 2 to Miami, they dropped game 2 to Cleveland. But the thing was, they rebounded very quickly on the road and made it known, like, no, that's a blip on the radar. We're not fooling around here. So I will say, like, last year is a great, if you want to use past history to kind of predict the future here, I don't think this team fools around at all. I do think they understand what's in front of them and how they need to attack this to make sure they don't play any more games, because they know, I think, like, yeah, keeping our minutes low is going to be big. Trying to get these, like, trying to step on the throat of teams is going to be big. And one of the things that I've enjoyed this year, Greenie, I think you might have even talked about this, is the calmness in which they play at the end of games when things are tight. I think they're way better at that now than they've ever been. They look a lot more calm in some of these situations. So, like, this is a team that is focused. I think they have the right mentality. I think they, through past history, know exactly what they need to do. And I think what we're doing right now, and look, it is because we have a podcast that talk about it, but I'm not nearly as concerned about going 6 games with some team unless something crazy happens and Trae Young goes banana land. Like, other than that, I think they'll handle their business accordingly, and they'll move on to what we're all envisioning is a great showdown with the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, and I just think, the Hawks have the playoff experience, right? They have guys on that team that have made deep playoff runs. And I just think if you're going to have a Game 2 Miami situation or Game 2 Cleveland situation where a team is making 23s, you're going to get that in a Hawks matchup more than likely as opposed to the Magic. It's one of those, you want to be confident because they've shown they can do it. They feel like they've graduated from their pre-title warts and concerns. At the same time, this wasn't a 32-4 season at home, right? They had bad losses at home this year, but were beyond dominant on the road. So the idea, I think that maybe they skipped a step or two here this year, where it's like they didn't play with that because they were so bad at home, in the 23 year, that last year that was like their focus. You could tell right away they were solving that problem. This year, it's like some of the losses were kind of weird, like the loss to the Hawks where Jrue Holiday just like doesn't hold on to the basketball at the end. Like that, I don't think is a lack of focus. That's just like a weird once in a blue moon type deal. I'm wary of the idea that they can't go in assuming, okay, we've gotten over our, playoff wards. We don't have to, be locked in. But at no point in the Joe Mazzulla era have I ever felt like this team doesn't lock in. So it's like if they're losing these games, it comes via an aberration, prayer, unsustainable 3-point shooting performance. It's never, man, they just weren't ready to go and got blown out right from the get-go. They just were playing unfocused. I just have not felt like that's been a problem in this version of, their roster.
No, to your point, as far as, you call it locking in, you talked about the calmness, like even just a few days ago, almost a week ago, that overtime win against the Knicks. Like that's a game that Boston, doesn't necessarily win last year, mid-season, even late season before the playoffs roll around. But you haven't seen too many games like that along the 20 losses this year. It is a team that just more often than not, there are outliers like that loss against the Hawks that you mentioned, alluded to earlier, Greenie. Like earlier, that game drove me nuts. But there are those games are so few and far between this year that you might get one of those in the playoffs, like for the entire postseason. But I don't worry about that being a something that people should regularly be concerned about. Let's take a quick break. Tell you about our good friends over at Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's 1,000x. Run your game all season long on Prizepicks.
Kaufman, you were very supportive of me last week, and I really appreciate that. It was a tremendous run of Prizepicks success, all thanks to Flex Play. I talk about it constantly on this show because it is the best thing I think out there on the internet. Now, I will say, I got a little too ahead of my skis last week. I was throwing out some interesting things, and I did finally have my hot streak come to a close because Cason Wallace did not hit a 3 at all in the game against the Lakers on Sunday. So that just, I learned a few things. But Flex Play continues to be my favorite thing to do because I only have to hit 2 out of 3 to make money. However, make sure you pay attention to the goblins and, whether they have an angry face and they're red or they're green. That's going to help you out in terms of payouts a couple different ways. But Flex Play continues to be what saves my bacon every week. So this show, I have 3 picks for this show that I like a lot. John Morant, less than 6.5 assists on Saturday night. Norm Powell, less than 18.5 points. And Michael Porter Jr., been in the news a little bit lately, more than 17.5 points. All 3 of those, the less than, the more than, I'm on the trends because 4 out of 5 times, those numbers have either come in less than or more than on those exact things. So just to tell you, I'm riding the trends, and you can as well. If you hit 2 out of 3, you get 1.25x your money. If you hit all 3, that's 2.5x. So just to tell you, the payouts are very nice, and getting paid could not be any easier. Kaufman, as little as 15 minutes. You can watch the money roll into your account. I use Venmo. It's the easiest way to do it, but you guys can have fun with however you want to do it because, money's money, and as long as it's in my account, we're feeling great about it.
Super easy, profitable too. Download the app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prizepicks app. Do it today. The promo code is CLNS. You get $50 instantly after playing your first lineup for just $5. Prizepicks. Run your game. All right, Greenie, let's talk a little bit about the path here for a moment because I mentioned earlier the Eastern Conference, the seeding is locked. The play-in matchups have been determined. Again, there's one day as we sit here left in the regular season. You're going to see the Celtics Hornets again, a team that at largely no Jaylen Brown, but largely full strength for Boston. You just saw a 30-plus point win, and the Hornets are, I mean, I don't know, college level team at the moment, and you're going to see, the main team out there for Boston to close out the regular season. So who knows what this thing is going to look like, but it's probably going to be like Pritchard, Hauser, Shireman, and
I don't even want Pritchard and Hauser to play, to be honest.
No, I get it. I think you probably will, but I get the sentiment. But again, presuming everyone just escapes that game unscathed, Boston win or lose, and I do win regardless because the Celtics are just so inferior on the other side. When it comes to what we have in front of us in terms of this postseason, here are the matchups. If people we're not going to do like a matchup by matchup breakdown or anything like that, but you have got Cleveland, the 1 seed, obviously playing the play-in winner of the Bulls and Heat, and then again it's going to be the Celtics going against the Magic or Hawks, and then from there you have the Bucks and Pacers, you have the Knicks and Pistons. And that's the Eastern Conference. So it's a really, as far as that Pacers, Bucks, and Knicks, Pistons, I think any of those 4 teams are live to win those series. By the way, I don't think the Knicks are this like runaway. Of course, they're going to win. I think Detroit, at like plus 300 odds to win the series or whatever the number is, I'd sprinkle that. I'd consider that. And if we don't see Damian Lillard again, and I don't know, that's an if. If we don't see him again, I absolutely think Giannis and company could drop that series against the Pacers. So we have, a couple of very interesting series in front of us. But in terms of the path for Boston, how do you feel about just from the onset, what this looks like in terms of trying to win the East and return to the NBA Finals?
I think it's a good path in terms of matchup, right? I think no matter who wins between the Knicks and the Pistons, because I do think the Pistons will stay in 6th. I think you match up good against both of those teams. If you think the Knicks come out of that, we've all seen how they have shown no ability to solve the matchup problem whatsoever. I think the Pistons, while tougher, it's their first go around. It's very unlikely, another team that has a decent defense, they're tough, but I think they just, again, we haven't seen them be able to solve. You have to beat this team 4 out of 7 times, right? So I don't think that either of that side of the bracket is a concern, in quotes, in terms of matchup. Where I think things get interesting is on the other side of the bracket, right? Because we've seen, and I'm assuming Dame is going to be active. I feel like they would have shut him down for the year if he wasn't going to come back for it. So if you assume that he's back, I just think there's more options to trip you up on the other side of the bracket if Cleveland doesn't even make it out. Like we've seen Indiana make deep runs. I just think that in terms of how things have, potentially shaken out, this is about as advantageous of a path as you could realistically have if you theoretically have to go, the Knicks or the Pistons in round 2, or the Hawks or the Magic in round 1, Knicks or Pistons around 2. Then in round 3, you may, if the Pacers or the Bucks, that's not going to be a cakewalk for the Cavs. So it's like, even though we always talked about how this year could be a tougher path compared to last year and all that stuff, how things are situated, I feel is like how every Celtics fan would draw it up. If the Bucks don't have Giannis or don't have Dame and they somehow advance and make it through, like that's even better, I think, for you. So I think as long as you can take care of your own business, this has been an ideal path given, your health situation.
Yeah, I do real quick, Ev. I just want to clarify one thing too. I mentioned the Cavs seeing the winner of the Bulls or Heat in the first round, which it could be the case, but they could also see the Magic or Hawks, depending on which one of those teams ends up facing the Celtics. They'll then move on within the play-in tournament and have an opportunity to, if they drop game 1, win game 2, advance that way. So I just wanted, for anyone that is new to the play-in tournament, I wanted to mention that as well. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I just you talk about the path possibly, and I think just for the NBA's sake, right, for ratings' sake, for Adam Silver's sake, like this couldn't have shaped up any better for the league, I think, because in the next round, Boston either gets New York, which is the biggest market in America, and the Knicks, who are, they're going to draw a lot of eyes to the television screen. There's some star power there with Brunson and with Karl Anthony Towns the way he played this year. Or you get to relive an 80s rivalry here with the Detroit Pistons. So I think either way, this worked out extremely well for the NBA. And as someone who likes rivalries and enjoys the intensity of rivalries, I think this will be really, really fun regardless. You get to avoid Giannis for as long as possible. If you look at the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference, in my opinion, the only player in the Eastern Conference you could put above Tatum is only Giannis, right? Because we always go to usually whoever has the best player is going to win the series. And a lot of times that does come true. I think Tatum is on the same tier as Giannis, if you want to be honest about it. I have made the argument that I think having Tatum on your team is more advantageous than having Giannis on your team. I have my reasonings for that. I'm not going to get into that on Celtics Beat. I think you guys all know where I stand. But the idea being, it looks like Boston won't have to worry about not having the best player in the series basically until the finals. And that's if you're doing this and you're looking at the path, it's hard not to think that this didn't break their way. It totally did, in my opinion.
Yeah, like all of the major potential roadblocks that you would think are on the other side of the bracket. Like that's, and I don't know if there can be any movement tomorrow, or if everybody is 4 through 6 is or 3 through 6 is locked in. I'm pretty sure the tiebreaker scenarios are like, I went to Arizona State. I'm not a math guy. Like, don't ask me.
Western Conference is even way more complicated than this, so it's like, I don't know what's going on over there.
Well, the seeds are locked in the Eastern Conference. That's not really.
Okay, so think about what you avoid. You potentially avoid the Pacers, Giannis, or the Cavs until the conference finals. Like, that is as advantageous of, like, if we were all at the beginning of the year saying, like, what would we want the path to be? My guess is all of us would include something that did not have them playing Indiana, Giannis, or Cleveland until as deep as possible in the playoffs, just because those are the teams that are the realistic challengers. Now, the Knicks are good. They've won 50 games, but we talked about, like, they haven't solved the matchup problem. So it's like, even though they're a worthy opponent, I feel like they are the worst matchup for you you match up the best against them compared to any of the other potential challengers.
Is there we've on our side text had this conversation quite a bit, Ev, but I'm wondering, Greenie, just, really what you keep talking about the matchup problem, what you think of the Knicks, because they were a team last year, had they been healthy, and obviously by the end they almost couldn't have been more banged up than they were when they went out to Indiana, and then of course the Celtics faced the Pacers and swept them in an incredibly competitive sweep, if you will. Every game was close, but they did sweep them. Still, that was a Knicks team that I would have been a little concerned about. I was not eager to face that team. Between the hostile environment of playing in New York and, just how hard-nosed and mentally tough and physically tough that team was, and obviously led by Brunson, and I know he wasn't 100% by the end, but, right now, do we even view the Knicks the same way in the wake of making that trade? As great a season as Karl Anthony Towns has had, statistically speaking, the team in a way just isn't, and I don't want to give like Julius Randle this power, but something got lost in that swap, and DiVincenzo was a part of it as well. But they're just not as scary a team as they were last year.
No, and it's a toughness thing, right? Like, they lost a little bit of their identity. They sort of sacrificed the defense and the toughness for offense because everyone is so terrified of trying to keep pace with Missoula ball that, like, they had to adapt the best way they could to that offensively. But a big part of, what made those Knicks teams last year a little bit more concerning were guys like Hartenstein off the bench, who was an unbelievable offensive rebounder. Like, they still had issues guarding on the wing. They still have the Jaylen Brunson being small issue. So they tried to resolve that by trading for Mikal Bridges. He can't guard Jason Tatum. He's not a wing stopper. OG Anunoby is a little bit tougher, but he still had issues in their last matchup. Now you have to deal with your two best players need to be on the floor for you in crunch time. That's now Karl-Anthony Towns and Brunson. Well, defensively, you are now putting yourself in such a compromised situation to where if they're not making every shot they take on the other end, they've now lowered their margin for error in a game against you because you need them on the floor for the offense, but having them on the floor is all you have to do. Give Tatum a high screen and roll with Karl-Anthony Towns in space. He's going to get to the rim or he's going to force rotation. So it's almost one of those like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of decisions for them, where last year, even if they were limited offensively, there were fewer defensive holes, which made them a tougher team to compete against. Now, you can handle, we just saw them combine for 60-something points in their last meeting between Towns and Brunson, and it still didn't matter because they couldn't get stops. So it's like you can now absorb their ceiling offensively, but they cannot absorb what you do on the other end of the floor, given their limitations.
Yeah, and we knew that after the first game of the season, it was going to be a problem. Like that first game against New York, where it's ring night, everybody's jacked up. The Knicks are super excited because they have this new team that is built to beat Boston and all this fun stuff. And then the Boston Celtics completely pants the Knicks in front of everybody, national television, first game of the season. You knew it right there that this was like, it's like, oh, so they just didn't solve any problems at all whatsoever. They thought they did by bringing in some defense, but it didn't work at all. They sacrificed it all by bringing in Cat. Again, Cat's been awesome, but it's still a huge issue for them trying to guard Boston. And that's what, like, the funny thing is you try and like look at some of these teams, the way they're trying to beat Boston, it just hasn't worked out. It's just impossible. The amount of shooting, the defense, the spacing on the floor, it's hard to replicate. And the only team, in my opinion, that can do that is either A, a Cleveland team that doesn't have Jared Allen on the floor, or B, just Oklahoma City with the way they can spread you out with Chet as the big guy shooting threes from 30 feet. So, like, there aren't a lot of teams at all that can handle the spacing, the shooting, the defense, the switchability, the stuff that Boston does. And none of them really reside in the Eastern Conference with the exception of, like, one team's lineup with Cleveland. And, again, we'll see how that goes when they get to that point. But to basically sum it all up here, I think three of us boys, this is an Eastern Conference Finals is the expectation at the very minimum. And like, they shouldn't even break a sweat to really even get there. Now, obviously, they might drop a game here or there, but like, I don't know. I feel, do people feel like they're overconfident here with the way things have shaped out? Because I feel a little overconfident here.
I don't think that's most people's minimum. That's, I think it's NBA Finals or bust. I think getting to the final two is viewed as people's minimum.
Yeah, I would say I think in a matchup with the Knicks, I would anticipate that the game we saw the other night is a little bit closer to what it would look like, especially because if Mitchell Robinson is there just for the rim protection and the offensive rebounding that he provides, I just think that game was a little bit more indicative of a playoff series with both. I just think overall, it's okay to be confident for a team that just won back-to-back seasons, 60-win seasons, and won the title. Like, it's not like we're overconfident without having done it, but the concern for me this run is, do you still have that same level of focus, locked in, whatever you want to call it, or are you going to be overlooking that, like, okay, like, our playoffs start in the finals or the conference finals? Like, no, your playoffs start just like everybody else's on the same day, and playing with that focus is how you get to another conference finals or an NBA finals.
Let's pause for a moment, tell you about our partners over at Gametime. There is nothing better than going to a live game. In fact, just recently, I went to the Red Sox game, had great seats up in the Sam Adams deck overlooking right field, just a picturesque view of the entire Fenway Ballpark, the intensity of the crowd, the fans. It was just, honestly, two things that were missing from the experience were, one, my kids, and two, Red Sox lost. That was unfortunate. Could have used a win. But so many core memories that I have, be it now or as a kid, it revolves going to a sporting event. Going to Gillette, the old Foxborough Stadium, obviously Fenway, the new Garden, the old Garden, you name it. Going to a game right now, it couldn't be any easier thanks to our friends, Ev, over at Gametime.
Yeah, Gametime is the best, and one of the things that makes it the best is you know exactly how much money you're saving on tickets, literally right up front. They have Gametime picks for you as soon as you figure out what event you want to go to, whether it be sports, whether it be concert tickets, theater tickets, comedy shows, you name it. The best deals will be presented to you basically right up front with labels on them to tell you how much money you are saving. The Celtics have some playoff games coming up that you're going to need to know how to get into the building for the least expensive price. My girlfriend's a huge Sabrina Carpenter fan. She's coming back around again in America. I'll be on Gametime all the time looking at tickets to see if I can find a way to get into the building for a reasonable amount of money. And, you know, look, not just the all-in ticket pricing, which gives you all the fees up front. That's one of my favorite things. There's no sneaky nonsense happening with Gametime. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy the tickets, just so you understand exactly what you are buying. But Kaufman, they have the lowest price guaranteed, and if it's not lowest price, Gametime's gonna pay you 110% of the difference, and your purchase is covered, Kaufman, with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry.
Take the guesswork out of it. Buy your tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem your code CLNS, get $20 off. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Greenie, if there's one thing that we have been talking about on this show for, show after show, weeks, months, honestly dating back to last year when we were saying it about that team as opposed to just this one, it's, can anyone really stand in the Celtics' way other than the Celtics, right? Like who's their toughest competition? And you can put the Western Conference into it too. Denver, obviously Oklahoma City. How do you view the Lakers now, what they're doing with Luka now that he is super, super comfortable? LeBron, I know, is a little bit dinged up, cost me some money last night as we sit here right now, and that was upsetting. But, we can save that, the whole get ahead of ourselves and look to an NBA Finals matchup if we're going to sit here as pompous Celtics fans and followers and say that reaching that plateau is the very minimum, the bare minimum, championship, finals level or bust. Mm-hmm. But before that, in order to get there, in order to get through these few rounds that it takes, again, the biggest thing for the Celtics is, and this is true of really any team, but especially when you are this talented, this deep, it's health, right? Mm-hmm. It is health. You mentioned it before. The Kristaps Porzingis setback of some sort is coming at some point. He's going to miss a couple of games here in the playoffs. You hope it's only a couple. You hope that Tatum remains incredibly durable. You hope that White doesn't have any issues. Hope that Horford has been load managed enough. Same thing for Holiday, that these guys can maximize what they're able to give you at this point in time. Pritchard has those young legs. Hauser, same story. Jaylen Brown is sort of the number one with a bullseye concern entering the postseason. We see a report from Ramona Shelburne over at ESPN. Pain management, injections in the knee for Jaylen, but he is expected to be ready for the start of the playoffs. Obviously, he has this extra time, the extra week. Hasn't been playing lately. Obviously, is not going to play in this regular season finale. So this is a lot of time to sort of heal up, attempt to get himself as physically right as possible. We don't know. We're not medical people. We don't know what the risks are, what the, is it a pain threshold thing? Is there a cause for concern in terms of further injury? I have no idea. I would just be guessing, and I would be bad at guessing. I'm not going to bother. But going into this playoff, presuming that you see the top 8 available to you come game 1 and you take it from there, is Jaylen your number one concern? Is it somebody else? Are you concerned at all? Or do you think he's going to be able to fight through this?
Yeah, I think he has to be, just for the sheer reality of he's really the only one that has. Drew has the mallet finger, but that hasn't been a problem for him, these last few weeks. And I was always of the thought that him playing here and there down the stretch was more he and the team know that this issue, whatever it is not going away in the playoffs. If you remember, I don't know if it was after the Knicks game or the game before, he talked about how, he was going to have something done before the playoff. Like this Ramona Shelburne update to me was like not surprised. I mean, Jaylen told us he was going to have some sort of procedure or something for the playoffs. But I think it was more about they knew it wasn't going to be completely healthy. So it was, we now need to learn what is and is not possible in this new normal for him. What can he do offensively? How is he limited defensively? How do we need to maybe change our rotations or matchups on any given night because his lateral quickness is impacted or whatever it may be? Heading into a playoff series, they need a healthy Jaylen Brown to win the title. Like, this isn't like you can survive with no Porzingis because you have everybody else. They need Jaylen Brown to win a championship because Porzingis is so, such an unknown. I think it's unfair to require Al Horford to have to backpack this team's production at 38 years old. So what we get from him, we won't know until we see it. But I also don't think we will see it until we see how he looks against a team that has length and legit perimeter defense. So if that's against the Magic, you'll learn right away. They're a tough physical team with great length. If it's a team like, the Hawks and Dyson Daniels is guarding Jason Tatum, I think there's a lot more, area for him to, not have to put super high amount of stress on his knee. But I just think it's one of those things where every year of my life, someone has been hurt in the Celtics playoff run. This year, it's going to be Jaylen, and how they manage it is going to be the story of their season.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like the other guys aren't important, but Jaylen Brown carries a different type of weight. Right. And the one thing that I loved is throughout this process is he was, talking with Paul Pierce, who's the captain champion of old man game of right. How the hell did he get that off? Like, he has no no, Paul Pierce was an incredibly crafty player as he got older. He figured out how to use angles and his off balance versus the off balance of the person in front of him to get this. Like, he was excellent at that. And I think Jaylen playing on it, a lot of people had opinions on it. I'm not saying that I didn't either, but I also saw the value in trying to figure out what that feels like right. Trying to figure out playing on this knee, because you're going to have to do it.
Because it's not going away.
Right. How to manage that pain, learning what your limitations are. Like, we always talk about the regular season being, you're just trying stuff at certain points of the regular season to see if it sticks. I mean, certain lineups you've never seen before, they're going to give it a shot just to see if they can go to that later on. This is exactly what that was. It was, okay, can I do this? Can I do X, Y, and Z? And honestly, I found it kind of very refreshing to watch Jaylen, who was just an otherworldly athlete. I mean, the guy is ridiculous in terms of first step, in terms of his leap ability, his bounce, like he has a ton of athleticism packed in that body. But it was a different way of him to play and learning how to kind of play off 2 feet and try and figure out like this as he ages and becomes, a 30-year-old and things don't work as well as they used to. Like, he's going to have to learn this sooner rather than later. And doing it now with live reps and doing it in the playoffs and have an idea of what your body's capable of. Like, I understood the reason why people panicked on it and had a lot of opinions on it, but I felt like a lot of that overshadowed like why it would be valuable for him to play right now. And it like, if it can't get any worse, because you got to imagine that they had this conversation of like, you playing on it is not going to make it any worse than it already is. If that was the case, then I completely applaud. Like, I don't think we've done it. Like, and this is going to sound homery and it's going to sound whatever. I don't really care. We didn't applaud him enough for trying to gut this out and trying to figure out what he's capable of. A lot of it was, okay, how do we tear Jaylen Brown down because he sounds selfish for trying to make an all-NBA team? Whereas, like last year, how like for his Game 5 performance, how many flowers did we give Kristaps Porzingis for gutting it out when he clearly wasn't 100% trying to get through Game 5 against the Dallas Mavericks, right? I think Jaylen did not get enough credit for what he was trying to do. And I think a lot of people thought he was selfish for doing so. And I thought that was the wrong take.
It's just bad intellectual process, though, because why would you want the first instance of him and the team to live in this new reality to come in game one of the playoffs? Because for all you know, you're not prepared for it. And then maybe he injures himself further, or you're just playing a version in a style that ends up costing you. Now, even if he's not going to be, if it's like 75% the rest of the way, you now have a basis of knowledge of how to approach this injury by, playing him in these games where the result does not matter. So I just never understood. And maybe it's just a certain subject of people who are just always going to be weird about Jaylen Brown for whatever reason. But when you think through the process of it, if you are of the rooting interest that you want the best for the Boston Celtics as a team, why wouldn't you want them to figure this out in games that do not matter so that you are ready and prepared for the games that do? So the entire discourse around it was just, you had people saying, oh, he's trying to make, all NBA, get this incentive. He doesn't even have an incentive in his contract for making all NBA. He's on a standard max deal. So it's like people were just going so haywire over it. And I don't know if it's just because people are always going to be weird about him for whatever reason. But
it's more than that. It's more than that, because I was one of the people that I wasn't among the most, sort of critically concerned, if you will, as some of the other people out there that have, just been posting tweet after tweet about Jaylen chasing down 65 games to be award eligible and all of that. But in some of our side texts, I certainly raised the concern, not for incentives, because I know that about his contract. There's no more money in it for him. I don't think it's people being weird about Jaylen Brown as much as it is just acknowledging the person we're talking about. And this is going to come off in a critical way, and it's really not meant to be, because I don't think this is unique to Jaylen. But Jaylen is someone who has, made a public stink about not getting either awards or recognition that he believes that he is due. So, as recently as last year. So, whether it was the Olympic team or whether it was not being all NBA, third team or defensive team or whatever it was at the time, I don't remember. But, he is someone that has been vocal about this stuff. And so when you see him toward the end of a season playing in meaningless games with respect to seeding, and, you don't need him out there, and you're thinking about preserving health, and he's at this moment, not now, but, a few days ago when he's still in the mix to play in 65 games to at least be award eligible, whether or not you believe he would even be, a recipient is another conversation altogether. But to stay in that chase, to be in the conversation, I think it was a justifiable concern on the part of people simply because of, again, the individual we're talking about who has, in the span of a calendar year, made a big deal about this stuff in the past. But that's column A, right? That's talking out of one side of my mouth. The other side of it, and I will agree with what you're saying, I'm not going to go so far as, giving him his flowers for it and applauding him and all of that stuff. But I do think on the part of Jaylen and the team and the medical staff or anyone involved, I do think there's a justification to get out there and see what this looks like, see what this feels like, ahead of the playoffs, what you're dealing with when the postseason rolls around. Because again, no insight into Jaylen Brown's medical situation whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. I have no idea any more than the next person, the two of you or anyone out there watching or listening, whether Jaylen can suffer or could have suffered in the regular season late some sort of a setback that would have made this worse going into the playoffs. And if the answer is yes, he could have, and I'm not talking about a new injury, I'm talking about this specific knee situation making it worse, then yeah, that felt like a little, what the hell are you doing out there? Go ahead and figure it out in game 1, game 2 of the playoffs against a team that you should beat, even if he's not on the floor at all. I would have been okay with that. But if it's a situation where he can't make anything worse, then fine. Go out and play around a little bit and figure yourself out. Like I get it. I get it on, again, his part, the team's part, everybody involved. So I just think both sides of that coin, Greenie, with respect to the dude we're talking about, are very relevant.
It's just one of those things where the team and the player and the coach told us what their plan was going to be. He was asked about the 65. He said that's not a motivating factor. They then lived up to that plan.
It is, though.
But why not? If he's so adamant about, this recognition snub, like, I don't think anyone would fault him for wanting to be all NBA eligible. I just think people lost their minds in a sense that you have to assume, since we don't know the medical side, that the team does. And if they're putting him out to play, it's probably along the lines of, it's not going to get any worse. Whatever it is, it's not going to get fully better with rest, and it's not going to get worse if you play. So you give him enough of a run to where you're getting a sample size of production. At the same time, he's hitting the threshold in the event that he ends up playing in the 65. It's both can be true, right? Like, you could want to play the 65, but that can also not be the motivating factor for why you're playing. And I think that nuance is what got lost in the whole discussion. Then we learned that he didn't even, qualify for the 65. So it's like, okay, it was probably more along the lines of figure out how to play on it. You're going to get to the end of the season. Everyone's going to rest. And, you cross your fingers that in a week from now, after whatever injection he just got, that it's not as much of an issue, because it was a mixed bag of results, right? Like, he looked good against the Suns and the Wizards and looked awful against the Knicks. So my guess is in the playoffs, it's going to be somewhere in the middle of what version you're going to get. I would much rather have a body of work to know what's possible with this version than going in blind into a playoff series.
Yeah, just real quick, like this, again, it's irrelevant because, like you said, he didn't get to the 65. But if he had played yesterday, right? If he had played yesterday and
the Magic
game. No.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
right. If he had played yesterday and was at 64, and all of a sudden he's the one dude and a whole bunch of, old Red Claws out there playing in game 65, for 65 in game 82, the conversation would be very relevant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's, but
it's not happening.
If he didn't miss games earlier in the year, he would hit. It's like,
true of anybody. Nobody's starting the count that early unless you're like Embiid, somebody like that. So it doesn't matter anyway. It doesn't matter. He didn't get to 65. Doesn't matter.
But I also don't even know, because did anybody play was anybody close to the 65 last year? Like, that could have been like all NBA defense eligible, or I bet there was. Everybody
I bet if you went back and looked, there was probably someone who landed at 63, 64.
Yeah, like I wonder, because I can't remember if they sat everybody for the very last, aside from like Pritchard and Hauser.
You mean specific to the Celtics? That I'm not.
Yeah. Like I'm trying to think of how they were last year, because obviously Jaylen didn't make all NBA, but he may have been eligible. I just think they would have sat everyone regardless in the final game of the year, because that's just what they do as a team.
I'll look. This is a very easy thing to tell you, and then we can move on with the conversation. But looking back at the 23-24 season, you had 65 plus for Tatum, Brown. Porzingis was at 57. White, Holiday, Pritchard, Hauser, Horford, and I'll stop there. All those guys played in at least 65. So
how many were like at? Oh, so they were over 65. Okay.
Yeah.
So no one was really on the bubble.
At least 65. No, I mean the not that he. I know he's campaigning right now for award recognition, but the only guy who would have been on the bubble would have been Luke Cornett at 63.
So yeah, I'd like to think that they would be smart with the bigger picture, but I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things we'll never be able to know because it didn't happen. And I think partially that wasn't an accident, right? Like remove that option from even existing. And that's why they sat him last night, right? Don't even make that an option.
Sure.
And we won't have to worry about it. Good decision by everybody involved.
Yeah, I agree. Well, all right. We're short on time, so we're going to wrap up here. But I do think it's, Evan and I are not going to be with you next week to fully dive into, I guess the one thing I didn't ask you guys before we wrap, we'll do very quickly, who will it be? We've talked about, do you prefer the Magic? Do you prefer the Hawks? Who wins that matchup to determine this?
I say Magic.
That's funny. I think Atlanta's going to win. because I think just offensively they'll be too much for Orlando.
The game's in Orlando, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'd say Magic.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the Hawks. I'm with Ev. I think it's going to be the Hawks, and I want it to be Orlando. How about that? There's some good fence sitting for you. For Dan Greenberg, of course, make sure you follow along, get those Twitter notifications out there for him, and of course for Evan Valenti, I'm Adam Kaufman for our partners as well. Everyone enjoy the next couple of weeks, and when Ev and I return, we will be mid-round one, wrapping up round one, looking ahead to round two, or, talking about how Bill Chisholm has made a mistake and he should have bought a different team. We'll see how it all plays out. Let's go Boston. We'll catch you next time.